In this video, I'll show you how to create client-branded apps using Lovable, Supabase, and n8n, all without writing a line of code. I'll be going through an example of how to create a multi-step article generation app. We'll be using UXPilot to create the designs, Lovable to create a dynamic front-end app, Supabase to handle logins, database, and for storage of sensitive information such as API keys. We'll also be getting n8n to do lots of the heavy lifting in the backend to build out the essential features of the application. We've got separate n8n scenarios to create an article outline, to generate an article, to generate images, and to publish those to WordPress. Whenever our application wants to trigger one of these n8n scenarios, such as to regenerate an image, it uses Supabase as a middleman, which stores the credentials and webhook details securely. The approach I'm explaining today will work with most vibe coding tools and with any automation platforms that use webhooks. When you're building one of these apps, you do not necessarily need to know how to code, but it is very important that you start thinking like a product manager, or even better, like a solutions architect. Before you start building, you need to make one important design decision, and that is, are you going to go the multi-instance route, which means you're going to create a separate application for each separate client, or are you going to go multi-tenant, where you have lots of clients accessing the same application? On the surface of this, it might seem incredibly obvious to just go with the multi-tenant route, but it's not always as simple as that. If you're building apps with any level of complexity where you're going to have client data within the app, then creating separate apps, i.e. going the multi-instance route, just makes it far easier to isolate the data based on your clients. They're much easier to build. Clients might have specific requirements where you can just update their individual instance. It's far easier to integrate n8n scenarios with the multi-instance approach because you could have your nodes directly tied to those client accounts. In this case, this node is tied to a client's WordPress account. The same could apply to social media accounts and lots more. The two biggest downsides of this approach is that you'll have higher subscription costs, and it is not as easy to onboard extra users. You need to spin up other applications. With the multi-tenant approach, you could have multiple users within the same system, and they will get populated their own relevant posts, their own relevant records, based on what they see in the database. If you're going the multi-tenant route, then all of the data for your clients are managed within the same database, and they're separated by user IDs and by correct row-level access security. So you need to make sure to properly test that data separation logic and make sure that clients are not seeing each other's data. When you're integrating with n8n, a key point to keep in mind here is that your webhooks must be made generic, such as in this example to upload an article to WordPress. That cannot be directly tied to an individual client. It needs to be made generic. You could, for example, pass in parameters relevant to that specific user's WordPress instance, or else you could pass in a user ID and then this would need to communicate with Supabase to get the relevant information. When you have a multi-tenant app set up correctly, it's much cheaper to scale, and it also works very well as an end-to-end SaaS type platform where you'll be able to take in payment, create user accounts, and it will work quite well from there. But it's much harder to customize per client, and there is a single point of failure. So think carefully about that approach before you create anything. The app I'm creating in this tutorial works very well as a multi-instance application. However, most of the logic is in place to make it multi-tenant because we can easily create multiple user accounts from here, but you need to make some tweaks to make this scenario generic. Before I get started building out this application, I'd like to quickly touch on the topic of payment. Now, you can take payments from clients during your onboarding process completely outside of this application, and then simply go into the users table in your Supabase account and then create that user. You can do that either manually or very easily using an automation platform. You could alternatively get Lovable to actually integrate directly with Stripe payment, but we're still in the early days of these types of payment integrations, and I would not recommend that you go live with one of these apps without getting a developer to review the code. If you can handle payment outside of your app, then it simplifies things quite a lot. Let's get started. I could just start this project by creating some simple text prompts like create a web app that allows users to generate articles. And then I could add some extra context there. However, it's really important that you get the first prompt right and at the right level of detail, because that really sets the scene as to how successful this particular app building experience will be. I'm using a service called UXPilot.ai to create the front-end designs for the application, and then I've been able to iterate on those and update elements as required. I was able to do this all using natural language, just by adding in a context on the left. And then on this create flow section, each text box here equates to one individual page or screen within the flow. I started off here by creating a wireframe, and it created this initial wireframe layout. It generated a pretty impressive first outline. I was pretty happy with how it was creating these wireframes, so then after that I got it to generate hi-fi designs, which are more polished, detailed designs with full color. And then from there, it was able to generate this. I was pretty impressed with using UXPilot here. Overall, it was able to generate screens pretty nicely from my prompts. Trying to get these kind of visual elements consistent across all of these, I wasn't able to do based on just general prompting here, but hopefully this should be good enough. Now within Lovable, I have a pretty basic prompt where I'm just trying to get it to create the user interface, so the front end for the application. I'm not asking it to do any backend services here apart from the login screens, which is kind of important to do up front. So the initial prompt here is build an app that allows users to generate articles, use the below code and attached images as a basis for the user interface. I've outlined each of the steps here. So step 1 is generate outline. There should be a form with fields, article title, and article instructions. Step 2 is generate article. There should be a form with title and outline, tone of voice, keywords, article citations. For step 3, edit and publish article. This should be a form with 3 fields, article title, the featured image, and article content. The user will be able to edit each of these. There should be a publish button. Step 4 is the result, should provide the user with an article link. Then at the end, use Supabase for authentication, include a login and logout screen. Do not allow users to register from within the app. Everything up until here is just prompting for the user interface in the front end. And then at the end here is the Supabase authentication login part. And then this is going to get Lovable to create the login screen. It would be good to not include this within the first prompt, but within Lovable, if you're planning to include authentication, it's good to say it up front because there can be a lot of back and forth later on in trying to reverse engineer that back into code. Here I'm going to also say, here's the code for this first screen. Then I'm going to paste that below. And this is the code I got from the right-hand side over here. And here I've exported each of these flows as an image. Just click this button, go to export, and then select image PNG, and I've done that for every single one of these. Now within this Lovable interface, click attach. I'm going to designs, I'm pressing the shift button, I'm going to select all of those. I'll press open. This initial prompt is pretty busy. If it works first time around, then great. From there, we're going to press this button, and it's a big roll of the dice as to how it gets generated. Lovable 2.0 has just been launched, which is great. So click let's go. Now it's spinning up a preview of what this app is going to look like. Okay, so it's now writing the initial code for this. After a few minutes, it's still working away here. It's still on this spinning up preview screen. But if you actually click into the code, you can see that it's writing code as it's going along. And there is quite a lot of code for this to write. So I'm going to wait another few minutes and then check back. Okay, it's created a ton of code and now it's tried to load, but it's come up with this error. Build unsuccessful. So I'm just going to press try to fix. Then it's going to try to go through that and try and resolve it. So if we look at the error here, it says Supabase URL is required. So I've not actually connected my Supabase yet. So I'm just going to go up here and click Manage Supabase and then connect Supabase. As I mentioned earlier in the video, Supabase is the backend service that we're going to use throughout this application. It's where we're going to be storing our data. It's where we're going to handle server-side logic, user authentication, and it is where you would store things like API keys, which are sensitive, and you would not want those to be exposed on the front end of an application in the code. So I'm going to authorize this to access my Supabase. I click Authorize Lovable. Now it's connecting to Supabase. Now I'm going to create a new project. You can name that project whatever you want. I'm going to select the cheapest compute size. I've added in a database password there. Then you can select whatever region you want from there. I'm going to press create new project. If you're launching multiple projects on a Supabase account, there can be extra fees. I'm going to press confirm for that. Now it's creating the project. That can take a minute or two to get set up. When it is, then you can select this connect button. It'll be clickable. And now I'll press connect. Perfect. We can see Supabase is now connected. We can press the X button. Now from there, this build was unsuccessful. I'll click try to fix it at the top. We now finally have a user interface, which is looking pretty good. So let's try and sign in with just some dummy details here. It says sign in failed, which is exactly what we want. Then go back to Supabase again. We're going to go to all projects, going to refresh the page. From there, we'll go to authentication. I'm going to go and add a new user. So create new user. In this case, this is for a client portal. I really want to just manually create these users in the backend or do it via an automation. I do not want people to be self-registering from the front end in this case. So we can do it manually via Supabase. I've entered a username and password here and checked this box to auto-confirm. Press create user. And now we have a new user ID within this table. From there, if we go back to our app, then let's see if we can log in with those details. I'll click sign in and perfect. We're now logged in. This is looking pretty good to start with. We can update this later on with the client logo. But to start with, I'm going to select create post. We move to this generate article outline section. And this is in the exact format as we expected. So generate article outline. This is not currently connected to any backend services, or at least it should not be. I'll just type in, what are AI agents? I'll leave the instructions blank for the moment. We'll click generate outline. This is good. Okay, we have article title, article outline, tone of voice. It's created a bunch of different options for tone of voice, which is pretty cool. Keywords is looking good. Article citations, very nice. For article citations, really nice interface here where we can add these in separately. This is just the front end. Next up, we're going to be tying this in with n8n to actually generate that article outline and then inject that into the interface here. Click next step. The next step is looking pretty nice. We have a featured image section here. That's just an image from Unsplash. So they've just added in a dummy image here. Article content, which is editable. That's an editable text field, which is great. So that's pretty impressive. We have a lot of what we need. There's a save draft button, so I'm going to click that. It says fail to save draft, so that's not set up here properly, it seems. Let's go back to posts. No articles yet. Create your first article. So we have the front end mostly there. There are a few tweaks that we definitely need to do, but to start with, this is looking really good. Now we want to start hooking in our n8n scenarios into this, so it'll actually add some functionality to the application. As mentioned previously, I've broken out separate scenarios here. The first workflow we want to integrate with is this create article outline workflow. Now this is a pretty straightforward workflow where it's starting off with a webhook. It's simply expecting article outline and article instructions within the post body. Then it's going to go to Perplexity, which is a language model with real-time access to the web. And within that, we have this prompt where it's going to create a summary of facts, figures, and information to include for a blog post. Within the Perplexity prompt here, we're passing in the article title that would be sent in the body of the webhook request. And this is what is going to be sent from our Lovable app. At the end here, we have this extra optional section, which is that if article instructions is present, then it's also going to add that into the prompt. So this is the individual Perplexity prompt. We're passing that into our call to Perplexity. This is the URL, this chat completions URL. We then need to enter in a credential type, which is the header auth, add in create new credential, and then add in authorization as a name, and then bearer space, and then your Perplexity API key after that. From here, we're then going to actually grab the data from Perplexity that we got in response, where we're going to set the Perplexity output into one field here, and then citations, which is a list of URLs which were sourced when it was getting the information for that article, and then it's going to return an array of those. I have this extra pattern match and replace code here, because if we're using Perplexity's deep research feature, which is a great feature to use, in that case, it responds with these tags at the start and you want to get rid of those from the output. So from there, we're then passing that into an LLM chain, which is Anthropic Claude. So that will be creating the article outline. And this is where we're saying you will create an article outline for a topic based on the following topic and analysis. And again, we're passing the article title. There's a few extra sections here. You can pause the video if you want. And then we're also passing in this article instructions as well, if it's been provided. At the very end here, we're passing in the Perplexity output, which is very important because that is the research that we got from Perplexity. Okay, so that's all good. Before you start integrating this with Lovable, it's a good idea to actually test that webhook separately. So what you can do is go into a separate n8n scenario and type in HTTP. So you have a HTTP request, and from there, go to webhook, production URL, copy that out, and then change the method. You'd probably be using a post method, click URL, and then send body. It definitely is recommended to add authentication into this, but for the moment, we're going to leave that blank. For body content type, the parameters that we're expecting for this are article title and article instructions. For article title, we can just ask, what are AI agents? For article instructions, we can leave this blank for the moment. So I'll press test step. Now it's going to execute that, and hopefully we should get a response. If I go back to the n8n scenario, go to executions, we'll see that's currently running. Okay, excellent. We have an article outline and we have a list of citations. That's exactly what we want. So this is a working scenario. I've now gone back to Lovable. Now my next prompt here is for the generate article outline feature. This should call a webhook with the following JSON body parameters: article title and article instructions. Here I'm asking it to store the webhook in Supabase secrets. And because we've connected this to Supabase, we might as well use extra security features of Supabase. If you provide Lovable with your actual API keys or with sensitive webhook URLs directly within this chat interface, it is a recipe for disaster because it could include that within the front-end code of the application, which could be very easy for people with fairly minimal coding experience to be able to actually find that and then misuse those keys or URLs. I'm seeing a lot of people online add API keys directly to this chat interface, and to me, it just seems very, very dangerous. Okay, then I'm saying the webhook will respond with the following response body, article outline, and citations. Populate the response in the generate article section. Okay, from there, I'm going to press the submit button and let's see what it comes out with. Okay, it's now asking for the API key. If I press this add API key, it says enter your API key to continue. Manage this later from the Supabase menu. So I'll go back to my n8n scenario. I'll go to webhook. I'll click production URL, I'll copy that out, then I'll paste it into here and press submit. Now when I go back to Supabase, go to edge functions and then secrets. Now I can see this article webhook URL has been stored down here. Now it says the outline generation feature will now call your webhook and use its response. It says build unsuccessful. I click this try to fix it button up here. So it seems to have identified some errors there and it's trying to fix it. It seems to have not created required tables within Supabase, so it's now doing that. Now it's asking to review and approve these SQL commands to create the necessary tables. So here it's creating a new table called articles. It's updating some security policies. So if you're unsure, copy and paste this into ChatGPT to get it to interpret this for you, or you can also use the chat feature down here. I'm going to click apply changes. Now it's working through that. Now it's saying all of the errors have been resolved and new users will now be able to generate the articles. It's saying build unsuccessful, but I'm just going to try and test this application, see what happens. For the article title here, I'm just going to enter in anything. What is MCP? Model Context Protocol. I'm going to leave instructions blank for the moment. I've pressed generate outline. Then I'm going to go back to my n8n scenario. This is actually running, so it has successfully triggered this scenario at least. Now I've gone back to Lovable and for some reason I'm now logged out. I've entered in my username and password again. Click sign in. Okay, I'll try this again. Go to create your first article. This is the article title. I'll click generate article outline. Okay, that is now running within n8n and it actually worked, which I'm pretty surprised about, to be honest. Let's have a look at this. We have the article title and now we have the article outline populated, which is pretty cool. Tone of voice, article citations has not been populated. Let's press on and leave that for the moment and get the rest of these parts of the flow set up. So now we have an article outline. We can then hook it up with this next flow, which is this generate article webhook. This is a really simple scenario here where we have an incoming webhook. This is linked up with an LLM chain, which is linked to Anthropic Claude. From there, we have a pretty long article prompt where we're saying you will be provided an article brief below, write an article based on it. For the introduction, you will create an introduction and key takeaway section for an article based on the provided brief. This is a very similar prompt to the other blog workflow tutorials on the channel, so you can have a look at that, or you can pause the video as we're going along here. Tone of voice and keywords are not required based on this workflow. So again, we have this operator here to check if it exists. If it does, then we're providing that in the prompt. Otherwise, it will just return with nothing. The same for these keywords. And again, we're asking it to create a 2-sentence introduction, add key takeaways, maximum of 5 bullet points. And then there are a bunch of other sections here. Do not return a markdown. Then we're providing the topic and the article brief. We're surrounding these by XML tags, which is a pretty good way of prompting Claude. It's how it was trained. So we're passing the outline and the title. We're asking it to create a sources section based on citations and then some extra information at the end. Most importantly, we're asking this to respond in HTML format and to start the response with this p tag. After that, we respond with this webhook and we're passing in the response body from that previous LLM chain. Okay, that looks pretty good. Let's just test that function before we do anything else. I have a test workflow here with 4 different HTTP requests, and each of them are going to these separate scenarios or separate webhooks that we'll be triggering from the Lovable app. This is the test article generation. Click into that. So I have a test URL here. So we'll go to production URL, copy that out, make sure that's the correct URL from there. For the body content type is JSON. For parameters, we have title, outline, instructions, tone of voice, and keywords, and citations. So we just have some test data here. What are AI agents? And we're providing some citations. I'm going to test that step. That should now execute the other workflow. And it says post webhook is not registered. Not sure why that is. Production URL, I'll copy that out again. Click save, click test step. The scenario is actually marked as inactive. So mark that as active at the top. Workflow is activated. Go back, production URL. Okay, I've copied that in and we're now testing this step. The response data from that test looks pretty good. So this is now valid HTML. And we should now call this from within our application, and then we'll be able to hopefully create the article itself. Okay, so now we're prompting Lovable here. Where the user presses the next step, this should trigger a webhook with the following JSON body parameters. So we have title, outline, we have tone of voice, keywords, citations. Again, I'm asking this to store the webhook in the Supabase secrets. The webhook will respond with the following response body, text. I'm asking it to populate the response in the edit and publish article screen. Okay, I will press the submit button and Roll the dice, hope for the best. Okay, again, it's asking us to add an API key. It's called article webhook URL, which looks the same as the original one. I'm thinking there might be a conflict for that. Name this Supabase key generate article webhook URL. Okay, I'll press add API key and it looks like it did that. Okay, I'll go and copy the production URL for that into here. I'll press submit and now it should be creating the relevant code for that. Okay, now that I go back to the secrets within Supabase, I can see there's a separate generate article webhook URL. Okay, so I'll go back to Lovable again. Now I'll try to create the article. What is MCP? Model Context Protocol. I've clicked generate outline. Okay, this is good. We have an outline. It's looking good. Let's just proceed with that. I'll click next step. Hopefully it should call the next webhook. Okay, we have an error. It says fail to generate article. Let's have a look back at the n8n scenario. Go to executions, and that was just generated. It does look like it actually succeeded, so I'm wondering why that was. Let's look at the response data, JSON. Yeah, it looks okay to me. I'll just say I got an error message when generating the article. Let's say on the server, the webhook responded with the correct response as follows. I'm just going to copy that out and just remove a bunch of the text, just so we have the correct format. I'm just adding this in just in case it doesn't have the format right, and I'll press submit and then see if it can figure that out. So it's saying the edge function is encountering a JSON parsing error. Okay, so hopefully it should work next time. Okay, let's go back and try to regenerate that. So I'll click next step again. Okay, again, I've got another fail to generate article message. It seems to understand what the issue is here, so it's now editing the file. Let's try this again. Next step. Okay, we're getting somewhere. We have the response in the article content. Yeah, it's very good. Now, unfortunately, it has not rendered this properly in a rich text box. And it's also only taken up a pretty small portion of the screen. So I will ask it to make those updates. Say on the edit and publish article screen, the article content box should take up 100% of its container. It's too narrow. Also, it should render as a rich text box instead of plain HTML. Now I'll press send. Hopefully that should not take too long to update. Okay, let's go back and try and get it to regenerate that again. Let's see if that worked. Okay, unfortunately, that's not actually getting populated. This rich text area should be getting populated from the text output of the webhook response to generate the article. Okay, it's refreshed. That's looking good. We actually have some rich editable text here. Some of this stuff is not working. Bolding is working. Lists and alignment is not working. Okay, we're missing a few key functions here, which is that we need support for headings. Bullet points are not working. Okay, it's currently making those changes. Okay, it's saying headings are now supported. Let's see, are headings supported? I think they might be. No, still not. If I look at the code for that, I can actually see an unordered list. I can see headings. So the code is actually there. It's just that it's not been rendered within this rich text box. Last time before I keep going for the moment, still not working. It's saying that this edit article TSX file is quite long. After you test this, consider letting me refactor into smaller, more maintainable components. That might be required for this. Anyways, for the moment, let's keep moving on. And this is something you could come back to later on. Now we want this to connect to this next webhook, which is an image generation service. So we have the webhook here. We have this generate image HTTP module, and that's going to fal.ai to go generate an image. I was using a cheap model here for testing, but I'm going to update this to 1.1 Ultra, which is their best version. What we're doing here is we have this image prompt helper. We're going to pass in the article title, and then this is just going to contain a more condensed prompt to send through to the image model. So I have the production URL for this. So go back to Lovable again. When a user clicks generate article, it should also call another webhook to generate an image. Store this in Supabase secrets and call it image webhook. The JSON request body should contain article title. The response body will contain image URL. Populate this in the featured image box on the edit and publish article screen. Okay, I'll press send again, hope for the best. Okay, it's asking us to add an image webhook secret in Supabase, so it has not prompted it this time. I'm going to go back to edge functions, go to secrets, and I'm going to add in a new key for image webhook. Hopefully it should pick this up. I'll go back to the webhook, go back to production URL, copy this out. I've pasted it in as a value, and press save. Okay, that's the image webhook. Okay, let's press next step, see if it calls that image generation service. So in this case, it should now be calling two separate webhooks when we click this generate button. Okay, it looks like it was generated. This is a terrible, terrible image, but it actually is from fal.ai. For a more technical topic like this, it's definitely worth integrating with OpenAI's new image model because it's really good with illustrations. For the moment, let's just stay pragmatic and to keep progressing with this, even with this pretty bad AI image. Finally, we want to call this last webhook to actually upload this to WordPress. So we'll click webhook, we go to production URL, and then go back into Lovable again. And now finally, when the user presses publish, trigger another webhook, store this in Supabase secrets called publish article webhook URL, include the following JSON body parameters. The response body will be, let's go back to this webhook, and it'll be like that. So this is what it's going to look like. We'll go back in, the response body will be like so. Provide this to the user in the article generated successfully screen. Okay, hopefully that should be enough. All right, let's go back to the edge functions within Supabase. We need to add in a new webhook URL here. Hopefully it should have picked this up from my prompt. And now finally, I'll go to production URL, copy that out, copy it into Supabase. I'll press save. Okay, let's press publish, see if it works. It's showing up as publishing. Okay, article generated successfully. Now the article link looks like it was hallucinated. Oh no, we have a WordPress link. Okay, this article link is not correct, but the WordPress link might actually be correct. So let's click into that. And excellent, we actually have it published. That's fantastic. So we have this terrible AI image that was generated and all of the content, we have the title, all of that has been pushed successfully. So even though previously that it actually did not show up correctly within the rich text box, it is showing up correctly here. So that's pretty impressive. This is now showing up within the post history. So that's pretty cool. Okay, after a lot of back and forth here, I'm getting pretty excited by this. We now have posts showing up within the database, which is here. That's the previous post that was shown up as published. Let's go back to the actual database. Go into table, we have articles, and excellent, we have this showing up. So it has correct history showing up, and the client will then be able to look back at previous articles that were generated from here. So that's pretty impressive. And let's go back, try and create another one here. Let's just call this, what are AI agents? We go to generate article outline. So this is more of an end-to-end test where we're starting from the start to finish here. Okay, we have this generated article that we can edit this however way we want. I'll just press next step and let it go through the process. Okay, we have the article title. We have an image that was generated. We can look into that and it's pretty cool. Basic enough when it comes to AI image generation, but it's nice. We have the article content here, still not showing up perfectly, but the actual HTML is rendering in the background. Let's attempt this save draft mode. Click save draft. Article draft has been saved successfully. Let's go back to posts. Now we can go back into this agents. We're back into this, click view. All right, that's not actually showing up correctly. So we would need to rehook the routing and the logic for that so that if the post has not been created, if it's not been published, then it needs to go to the relevant step in the process. If I go back to the other page here, I'll select edit and yeah, it's maintained that within this page. So at least we can go back and press publish. So now we'll try and publish that. Hopefully it should be sent to WordPress. Right, I see that's been published. Looking pretty good. There's a broken image showing up here. Not really sure why. That may be due to my prompting within writing the article here. Oh yeah, within n8n here, I said you must include the following image with image tag after the first section. I just copied and pasted that from one of my previous blogging systems. So that is steering the output in the wrong direction there. So that's why you're seeing that extra broken image. Again, that could be easily solved by just that simple update within n8n. Finally, to wrap up a few pieces here, I fixed this part of the editor where headings and bullet points are now showing up correctly. I finally got this to work by just iterating that the text box within the article content panel is still not showing headings or bullet points, and I pasted in a screenshot of what I was seeing. From there, it worked perfectly after that. I then pasted in a link for a logo to include at the top left. There were 1 or 2 build errors that it fixed itself. Then I added in a pretty important security feature here, which is around using an authorization key to access any of the webhooks. Within each of the starting webhooks here, I have the header auth, so I click that here, and then from there created a new credential. I typed in authorization here. I went to expression here, typed bearer, B-E-A-R-E-R, space, and then just mashed the keyboard to type in an API key. From there, I copied out this API key, made sure to press save, but before doing that, I named this appropriately so then I can access this from within the other webhook scenarios, such as the other ones here. In that case, this is the credential name I call this. So then I could then access that from within all of the other scenarios as well. So I made sure to press save. Then I asked it to add a new secret in Supabase called blogging webhooks API key. Now, if we go to edge functions and secrets within Supabase, you can now see this at the very bottom. Then I asked it to pass this authorization header for each of the webhook calls. Header name authorization, value should be bearer, space, and then this particular API key value from the secrets. It prompted me to add in the API key, and from there it created this Supabase secret. And then from then on, each of the calls to the webhooks within our app are now passing in that relevant authorization token, which just makes things a lot more secure. To actually publish the app, I just pressed publish up here, and then I was able to publish this to a Lovable subdomain. Lovable already have built-in deployments into their app, which is a pretty cool feature. But if you wanted to add in a specific domain to this, so instead of it being a Lovable app, you could buy your own domain with .com at the end. You could add in a domain you already own from there. If you already own a domain, such as through Namecheap or GoDaddy, you could connect it here. Otherwise, you can go and buy a domain directly from within here as well. So it's super easy to deploy the app once you have it set up. And then to add a new user account for a client, for example, you can just go to add user, go to create new user, and then you can add it directly from there. I also asked it to add in the feature to regenerate an image. And from there, I just asked it to add the functionality to regenerate the image, which will call the same image API endpoint that we are calling when generating the image. When there is no image present, instead of using the unsplash image, just add a gray background. So that means that I can just press regenerate image here, then it will call this n8n scenario to generate an image, and then it's automatically updated this with the result. This app now serves as a great foundation, and we can extend and improve this however way we want by prompting Lovable to make updates to the user interface, by creating other n8n scenarios such as ones to extend out the article generation, social sharing, and much more. When you've made your updates, make sure to test them and then go to publish and then update, and then that will be available on the live site, fully deployed. As for creating an initial working version of this particular web app, I think it has been quite successful. We've been able to get things up and running quite quickly, and we have integrated with 4 separate webhooks to n8n. So there's a lot going on here. I think the idea of breaking out your logic into different webhooks definitely makes this process a lot more manageable, because the minute you start getting a little bit too complex, or where you start having extra server-side logic, or where you're trying to get Lovable to create Supabase edge functions with lots of logic in place, then things definitely start to get a lot more complicated, and there could be a lot more back and forth and just be going around in circles without really getting any good results. A major benefit of having these set up as separate webhooks, as separate microservices, means that you could then call those separately in your scenario. For example, when we click regenerate image, this can then call this webhook again. Whereas if you had everything tied together, then it just increases the complexity, where Lovable would have to be able to understand what aspects to call and what parameters to send. So I hope this video explained a few key concepts that should hopefully make things easier if you're trying to deploy n8n scenarios and sell them to clients and be able to create custom and interesting looking front ends that they'll be able to interact with. This is far more interesting and user-friendly than just handing over a client an Airtable base, for example. If you want to get access to all of these n8n automations so that you can hook these webhooks in with your own vibe coding apps, then make sure to check out the link in the description to our community, where you'll get access to all of our automation blueprints. We've got an active discussion board where you can chat with hundreds of fellow automators. We've got a packed schedule of live events where you'll be able to chat with us and other members. And you get access to all of these courses right away. Thanks for watching.